Okay, is it now fine? Okay. So, yeah, so this kind of a generic title, you know, it's always nice to send around because then you can decide 5 minutes before the talk what to talk about. And what am I going to talk about? So there will be two parts. One will be about ranging and localization and why this might matter in your daily lives. I mean, there were a lot of talks here about how to show that some implementation on a system is correct or secure. I mean, even the talk from this morning about L4 kernels. So you have a system, and you know that somehow within that system, maybe it runs correctly, it doesn't have any bugs, and so on. But what about some external measurements that this system does? What about its context awareness? And one of the main issues that you want to look at when you talk about context awareness is how does this device figure out where it is? So you start with some very simple questions, like are we physically close? So for humans, a fairly trivial task. We have a number of senses. I mean, probably computationally not very trivial, but we do have a number of senses and we are used to these kind of questions, and you can quickly judge. You can ask yourself another question, are you physically close to me? This now is no longer collaborative. I mean, in the previous question, are we physically close? You're somehow collaborating with another entity and you are together trying to figure this out. And if I'm asking, are you physically close to me? I'm sort of asking you to prove to me that you are physically close. So maybe I don't really trust you. So I'm trying to establish if an untrusted entity is close to me. And you might want to have some other properties, like you want to establish if a message is coming from close by. So they are kind of linked. One is linked to entity, and the other one is linked to message origin. So when you have wireless devices, and if they don't have any other senses like cameras or some other sensors, they mainly can rely on their wireless interfaces to try to establish if they are physically close. So, and there you get to secure ranging, and you want to compute the correct range to a trusted device in the presence of an attacker. So you have V and P, and you have M, and M is some attacker, and he's trying to change the distance that V and P compute. So if V and P succeed in computing the correct distance, then this is secure ranging. So why would this even be important? So let's take an example of a system that we analyzed maybe 2 years ago, which is called the passive keyless entry and start system, which is now today widely deployed in pretty much all cars. So what is this system about? You have this small token, key fob, which you keep in your pocket. And when you approach your car will sense that the token is close and it's going to open. Or when you grab a handle, it's just going to open, right? But essentially what it does, it's just going to do a discovery that the key is close to the car. So this shouldn't happen while you are at home, that the car unlocks. It should happen when you get close to the car. So there is a notion of distance. Equally, if you want to start the car, once that you get into the car should somehow figure out that you're in the car and not outside of the car to allow for the car to be started. So one of the scenarios is you step outside of your car, you fill in the gas, someone enters into your car, starts the car, and drives away. Because you were kind of close to the car but not in, you were outside. So the car should be able to distinguish whether you are outside of the car or in the car. But notice that there is no need for human action, right? I mean, you keep your key always in your pocket. All of this happens for your convenience, right? That you don't have to take the key out and press a button. You just keep it in your pocket, and you can use the system. The system is aware of where you are, or where your key fob is, better say. So how does the protocol work? Well, it's a challenge response protocol, and a number of these crypto primitives that are used in cars have so far been broken. But even if you assume that the crypto is perfect, then the protocol in terms of the authentication should work perfectly well. So how does it work? Well, a car is going to issue a fresh challenge. This actually happens on a low frequency channel. It's a very short range channel. It should work within 2 meters. So when you approach the car, your key fob should pick up this challenge. So this is always freshly generated challenge. So it's a notion of freshness that you all know about to prevent replay attacks. So this fresh challenge is then going to be somehow processed. You will compute a message authentication code over this challenge using a key that your key fob shares with the car. An authentic reply will be sent back on a different channel, which is essentially a long-range UHF channel. So, the car essentially will just check if the correct key K was used, because it can just verify this MAC, and whether the reply came within some maximum expected delay. And this delay, we will see, it can be in the order of microseconds. So it's essentially some sort of a timeout for the car. And then in that case, if this passes, these two verifications pass, it will allow you to open the door or start the car. So the antennas, there are several antennas in the cars. So sometimes even 6 antennas within the car. Your key fobs have sometimes 3-dimensional 3D antennas. So within the car, they can really fairly precisely determine where you are. Okay, so the main assumption of this kind of idea is that communication actually implies proximity, right? That if you're able to talk to the key, the key is close. But it doesn't. In adversarial settings, communication does not imply proximity. And it's a very, very simple, almost trivial type of an attack that demonstrates that authenticated communication does not imply proximity. And so what did we do? Well, we managed to open cars, start the cars, and drive away with a piece of cable and 2 hacked up antennas, overall with a cost of 100 Swiss francs or less. So we took an antenna that we bought, we pulled a piece of cable to an antenna that we made, which was just a piece of wire looped around, and we pulled a 60-meter piece of wire between the two. One attacker was close 2 to 8 meters to the owner of the car, who can be, I don't know, entering a shopping mall, and the other attacker was close to the car. We relayed the messages between the car and the key fob and relayed them back. And of course, then the car just simply opened. When we entered the car again talked to the key fob and established that the key fob is in the car, and we were able to start the car and leave. So the result, car opened and started. So it did not stop after relay was broken, and it worked actually through the house window. So we went to some nice neighborhoods in Zurich, people driving some very, very expensive cars, 200,000 euros and more. And of course, when we agreed with the owner to do this, the owner left the key on the table. You come home, you leave the key on the table. We came with an antenna, got the antenna close to the window, pulled the cable to the car, and excited the key, opened the car, entered into the car, drove away. Now, you don't have to. The nice thing about this attack is that you don't have to pull the cable behind you, because once the car starts, for safety reasons, it's not going to stop if it loses communication to the key. Because if you play with your key in your car, or your kid does, and you throw it out of the window, the car shouldn't stop mid-highway. So you can still drive away to the nearest disassembly shop and do whatever you think is appropriate with that car. So this is actually pretty bad, and these systems are currently in all major cars. So when we did this attack, the systems were just introduced, the manufacturing lines are well in place, so this vulnerability will remain for times to come. But we were kind of, the types of attackers that don't like to pull wires behind us. So we said, well, why don't we do something a little bit more clever? So we wanted to see if we can actually pull this off with a wireless relay, right? Now with the wireless relay, I did tell you that the car will measure some sort of a maximum delay time, right? It will have some sort of a timeout when it's no longer going to accept a reply from the key fob. So if you would try to, for example, grab the message from the car, demodulate it, get to the bits, and then send it over Wi-Fi to the other attacker, and then again transmit it on the appropriate channel, this will take too long, right? I mean, this doesn't fit within 1 microsecond. But instead, what we did something fairly simple. We just upmixed to a frequency that we needed, and this upmixing and amplification and filtering took less than 10 nanoseconds. We shoot it out over a wireless link, we downmix it, and we have it again at the frequency that we needed. And this worked pretty well. So this means that, if you have such a car, you're sitting here, your car is outside, I have a friend outside willing to help. I could just blast into this room the messages that are coming from the parking lot, pick them up, the colleague would get them and open all the cars on the parking lot. So this is not a good idea. So just to give you the reason why I put Model 1 to Model 10 is that we don't want to really pick on car manufacturers, but trust me, all your cars are here. So distance of the attacker to the key. So how far do you need to be to the key owner? Well, 2 to 8 meters. We didn't optimize this. I mean, trust me, this was just plain, very simple recording. So 2 to 8 meters, you can easily pick up so 2 to 8 meters is not a suspicious distance. I'm now 8 meters away from a lot of you. So within that distance. Also, the nice thing that and then we started testing, okay, after how much of a delay would the car, it's kind of a reverse engineering, how much of a delay would a car tolerate? So after how much time each car actually times out and doesn't want to accept the challenge. So it ranged between 35 microseconds to 10 to 20 milliseconds, which translated into distance allows you from 5 kilometers to 1,500 kilometers relays, okay? So sure, you lose some time in some other processing, but overall, it illustrates the point that this can be done even if you took your keys and want to take a flight to a far away city, your car might still be stolen. So immediate countermeasures, shield the key, buy yourself a fancy pouch that certainly breaks the convenience. But if you're paranoid, buy yourself an aluminum pouch, put your key in this pouch, and hopefully no one's going to get to talk to your key. But then each time that you approach the car, you will get your fancy pouch, take the key out, which essentially defeats the whole purpose of the system. So I mean, why is this a good example for us? I mean, we were doing research on secure proximity verification for a while before we hit this example or this system, and it started when I bought my car, and I didn't actually believe that my key securely verifies its distance to the car. So we learned something, that communication does not imply proximity, right? You don't have a control over attackers' gain, transmission power, and so on, right? I mean, there are limits to it, but you don't know what they are. So if you want to tell me that the attacker is not going to be able to hear your transmission further than a meter, under which assumptions? I mean, what kind of an attacker? How big is his antenna? What is his signal processing that he uses? I mean, what do you know about this attacker that gives you such guarantees of a meter away? In security, this is not an assumption that you are very comfortable with. When someone tells you, well, I'll be very quiet, they're not going to hear me. I mean, what does that mean? So we wanted to have something a bit more tighter. And that's what brought us to building new systems that can securely verify proximity through precise timing. And although this is a fairly, yeah, I think I can skip this. This is a fairly simple idea that you use precise timing. I will go with you through some challenges that we met during the time when we wanted to build such a system that could actually verify securely a distance between two devices. So we had essentially two goals here. So in the previous example, the car and the key fob were mutually trusted. So we wanted to measure a distance between two mutually trusted devices. We didn't want the attacker to shorten this distance, right? Because that's what the attacker did. He shortened the measured distance. Instead, what we wanted to do, so this is one goal that we want to do. The other goal is a goal of proximity verification. So what if P is untrusted? What if I want you to prove to me that you are close to me? So the burden of proof is on you, but I need to design a protocol that actually can do that. So how can you prove to me that you are closer than a certain distance? And that's another goal that we have, and we want to do this within a framework of one sort of device or one protocol.
I mean, in principle, that's not hard to do because there is a well-defined upper speed of communication, and therefore that gives you...
There you go. I told you that the idea is very trivial, right? But let's see, what kind of challenges we got when we wanted to implement this. So there are some other properties that one could try to achieve. So the one is this distance fraud resilience, so where you want to compute an upper bound on a distance to an untrusted prover. The other one is this car scenario where an attacker wants to shorten, and there are some more esoteric properties that I'm not going to talk about, but I just mentioned them for completeness here. So before I start with that, there are actually many systems that are affected by this kind of problem, right? This is not only a problem of cars. Today you have NFC payment cards. I received mine recently. My bank didn't really ask me if I wanted. They just gave it to me. And so what can you do with those cards? Well, you can do a relay and make the person who stands behind you in a queue pay for your stuff, right? This works only for 50 Swiss francs or $50, or actually 40 Swiss francs in Switzerland, that's the limit, and for $50 in the US, that's the limit that the company set on this kind of payments by pay by touch, because there's no need for user interaction. You're not even aware that your card paid for something, right? You're not required to in some way confirm the transaction. And there are some other examples where you would want secure proximity verification. So the lesson learned: authenticated communication does not imply proximity. We need to build different primitives. They are called distance bounding protocols. And as you said, there is an upper bound on the communication speed. You know that radio will travel at the speed of light. For a while there was a scare in CERN. They claimed they could do faster than that. So I was somewhat concerned that our protocols are broken, but I don't think that scare is relevant anymore, it seems. So what do you want to do? So the verifier is asking a question: is the prover close? Right? So what the verifier wants to do is that if a prover is located at this distance dr, that the prover is not able to claim any closer distance than this. Right? So it's a simple thing. What you would do, you would challenge a prover with an unpredictable nonce, and this unpredictable nonce would come to the prover, and you would allow a prover some processing time. And then the prover would send this this nonce. I mean, it's actually a function over this nonce back to you. You will measure the round trip time, and based on this, estimate the distance. Now, the prover cannot, of course, start replying before he receives the nonce, so you are sort of done. And so that's so nice. We thought that this will be a breeze to implement. But then there are, of course, issues, and these are the issues that you start thinking about. So first of all, the prover should quickly receive the challenge, compute the function, and send back some sort of reply. So this means that you better have some very, very fast turnaround time at the prover. And how fast? Well, 1 to 2 nanoseconds is 15 to 30 centimeters, so go figure how fast your radio has to be. So if you have a radio at hand that does this kind of processing, great, then you're in luck. Then your radio can handle distance bounding protocols. But if not, then you have to think of how to do this. So there are two things that you want. You want this processing time to be very short, because you don't trust the prover. If he tells you that he spent 100 nanosecond processing, and he in fact spent 50, then he cheated by 50 nanoseconds. And that's quite a lot of distance. So you need something that guarantees that the prover can do it in ideally 0 nanoseconds, that he cannot cheat. You also want this processing time to be stable in case that the prover is that you consider a trusted prover, so that you don't have some variance in your measurements. Okay, so so people started playing with protocols actually well before this problem of cars. There were two guys called Bruns and Chum in 1993 at Eurocrypt. They published a protocol where they said, aha, but we have a really clever way of how to do upper bounds on the distance. And the way that we are going to construct our protocol is that the processing function that is required will be just an XOR. And you know, what's better than an XOR? I mean, it's the simplest thing that you can do. You XOR 2 bits. That's the fastest thing that you can do. And that's the fastest thing that your radio in the end then would be able to do. So you want some dependence of the result on the input, and here you're only doing an XOR. And we started digging into this. We started asking ourselves, okay, how fast can we do this? Because signatures, hash, MACs, encryptions, and all of the things that we traditionally use in security are absolutely expensive. I mean, these are very, very long processing times. So what can we do? There was another idea using bit comparison in 2005, but it's quite similar to this. So an XOR. The nice thing about this protocol was that there was some commitment phase, kind of a slow phase. There was another slow phase here, but the time critical phase needed only an XOR. But now you're starting to think about, okay, if I send my challenge, how long is this challenge? I mean, how do I send a single bit? Do I send like 5 bits? Now, if you send a long challenge, what can happen is that the prover can start guessing the last bit of your challenge, and by this time, cheat on the distance. And he can guess by 1/2 because it's a single bit. Now, you don't want that, right? So that's one thing that, so your challenge needs to be essentially a single bit. That's the first thing that you have to do. Another thing is that even the modulation scheme that you use should be such, yeah?
Why can't you cheat on a single bit?
Sorry?
Why can't you cheat on a single bit? Just send anything back.
What do you mean cheat on a single bit?
You said a message.
Because there will be many bits, but you have to send them bit by bit. So it's much better for me to send you a bit and require a bit back, and then do this k times and not send k bits and then expect the k bits back, because then you can guess the last bit and gain the distance by this last bit. And why is this important? Well, because if you look at your physical layer, this is your symbol and it has a certain duration. And if you take well-used standards, this duration is 1 microsecond, right? And this is quite a long time. We're talking about nanoseconds here. So this time here that he can, so what if his receiver is so smart, so the prover is so smart that after half of the symbol he figures out what the symbol is. Then he can cheat by half of the symbol, and that's still quite a large gain. So we did some simple tests with chirp spread spectrum where this is kind of obvious, right? Chirp is something that starts with low frequency to high frequency to low frequency to indicate the bits. But after half a chirp, you already know pretty much which symbol you're receiving. So, you can cheat by quite a lot. So you cannot use such a system. And chirp is actually quite popular if you're talking about any kind of ranging applications, because it has a lot of robustness given the wide bandwidth that you use. So what do we need? We need a prover to receive, process, and send back in few nanoseconds. Great. Our radios are not typically designed with this kind of constraints. Robust to logical and physical layer protocol design. I'll talk about protocols a little bit. We need a fast processing function, order of nanoseconds, appropriate modulation with very short symbol lengths. We need high precision ranging system, and we need the distance bounding protocol on top of that. So this is all that we need. So this is our wish list. And we want to kind of, have different security guarantees. For example, the distance by which the attacker can cheat should be very bounded, some small distance, maybe 5 centimeters or 10. So what are our design choices? Well, we can design a digital transceiver with longer, and I'll get to that. So we can have some add a prover. So these are some prover design choices. We can have an analog front end, analog processing, and then send something back. Or do something in ASIC, or do some mixed, so have a ADC and then some processing in FPGA, some CPU, whatever. So there are many choices. But two main kind of choices that we wanted to test was A, digital design. So what can we do if we convert the signal into a digital domain and then process? Or analog design. So what can we do if we don't even, we kind of act as a radar. We push things, we bounce the signal off very fast because that's very fast. If you don't convert it to a digital domain, well, you can be very fast. But you might be actually limited in terms of the functions that you can implement. So in terms of digital, we opted for ultra-wideband based ranging. These are 1 nanosecond pulses, which fulfills one of our requirements. We want very short symbol length. So if you can cheat by half a nanosecond, well, we are still fine. That's 7 centimeters. That works for me. We formed a special modulation scheme. I don't want to get into that. This is actually quite a lot of details that I'm omitting. The nice thing is that once that you convert these symbols into bits, you can have any kind of a simple processing function. It can be an XOR, it can be some comparison, whatever is kind of fast enough for your application. So this is our prover design. And what did we manage to achieve? So our best implementation back in 2011 was 96 nanoseconds. So we had this kind of a board. And it had a very fast ADC. And you can see sometimes here, I'm not going to get into those. But in the end, we got about 96 nanoseconds. Today, we can get it at around 40 nanoseconds. Was our best digital implementation for a prover. So we could show that we can have an implementation of a prover who does an XOR, receives a message, XORs, and sends it back in 40 nanoseconds, which is still for some applications fairly fine because it's 7.5 meters or 7 meters, 40 nanoseconds, I guess. And then what does this mean? This means that the prover, that an attacker, if he would do the processing in 0 seconds, he would be able to gain 7 meters. That's his advantage. So for some applications, this is still fine. But the nice thing is that you can replace an XOR with whatever you want because you first get the bits into the digital domain. So now you can, whatever, do an XOR, add with some constant or whatever you think it's appropriate, which actually simplifies your protocol design. Now, okay, I have time. So we then wanted to test what can we do in the analog domain. So what if we don't turn the signals into a digital domain? How much can we get? Will we be much better, and what kind of properties will we get? So we came up with this idea, challenge reflection with channel selection. It's kind of a long and compounded name, but it tries to describe what we did. So the idea is that the prover doesn't really interpret the challenge that it gets, but essentially, based on his local input, which is a part of the protocol, will reflect the challenge that it gets either on one channel or the other. So it has two channels on which it can send the message back. So it's receiving the message, and then it says, without processing this message, it says, okay, now I'm going to send this message, exactly the same message back on one channel or on the other channel. And by channels, I mean these are communication channels, so different central frequencies on which this communication happens. I don't know if this describes it well enough, but this is your challenge. And now what happens is that this is a reply, and the reply is essentially the challenge either sent on one channel or on the other channel. So here he's sending back this part on channel 1 and this part on channel 2 and so forth. Now the selection between these parts is, what to send on which channel is a part of the protocol. So what happens here is that essentially the verifier will do all the work. Because now when this signal is sent back, the verifier needs to correlate the signals and get the distance. Okay? So if you pushed here some sort of a spread spectrum signal or whatever, you can then send this back and merge the signals and then do some correlation to get your distance. And the nice thing about this kind of an idea is that from the moment that your challenge enters into the prover until it gets out of the prover, you need about less than 1 nanosecond. And this gives you pretty strong guarantees in terms of how much the prover can cheat, right? Because now if the prover can do it in 0, well, he gains 1 nanosecond, which is not much. Okay, so why am I know that there are a lot of details that I cannot show here, but I want to show you, for example, one thing here, which is now a distance bounding protocol that we can build on top of this analog processing idea, right? And I just want to show you that it can be fairly complex, that it can contain a lot of details, that in the end we have to push through some formal verification. Yes?
So I didn't understand the significance of the 2 channels. What would happen if it were an analog signal that was sent back on a single channel?
Well, you wouldn't be able to signal anything back, right? So by using 2 channels, I can send you back bits, right? If I send you back exactly the same thing, I cannot send you back any useful information, and therefore I cannot send you back somehow the proof that it was me who sent it back. I cannot authenticate myself back to you.
What if you do something that's still an analog to the signal and then send it back?
Yeah, but we do. I mean, we just separate it through 2 channels. So the signal gets here, it's mixed, it gets to 2 frequencies. So you just push it through a mixer, you get 2 copies, exactly the same. One is on a higher frequency, the other one on a lower frequency. And then you have a selector here, and you just select which one you're sending out. And this is how you indicate bits back to the verifier, right? And this basic communication enables you very fast communication, at the same time enables you ranging, because you're sending, the verifier knows what he's expecting back. And it is sufficient for us to build a distance bounding protocol in the end, right? Because for us this was very important for us, that we are able to, that the prover is able to signal things back to the verifier. If you don't have this, you cannot build a secure distance bounding protocol, because then what he's sending back would not depend on the challenge, right? And then you're gone, right? You need something where a prover can process and send something that depends on the challenge back to the verifier, right?
Are you going to describe the design of that?
I don't have time to go into. You mean the protocol, or?
What is done at the prover? Like, how do they decide the splitting?
So it's actually a part of the protocol. So initially the prover, it would take a while, but the prover initially will actually send a so-called cryptographic commitment to the verifier, telling to the verifier in advance what is the selection that he's going to do on the signal that he will receive from the verifier, right? So the verifier essentially knows in advance kind of which parts of the challenge signal the prover is going to send back on which channel, okay? So he knows which bits to expect back. But this is a commitment, which means that he will know this at the end of the protocol. But again, Yeah, this would take a while, so I'm not going to go into too many details. I know that yeah, somehow it's not easy to cross this kind. Yeah. Okay. So so what are the kind of things that we notice here? So with the digital transceiver, so our bottom line is with the digital transceiver we can get longer processing time, so slightly less guarantees on the distance. But we can have a broader choice of functions that we implement, and as a result, we'll have kind of a broader set of applications. So we can actually prevent some more esoteric, we can have a broader application in some more esoteric scenarios. Whereas with analog receivers, we have more narrow applications, so we can really just prevent this kind of we can prevent this car scenario, or we can prevent someone from cheating on his immediate distance. Okay, so I know that there was a lot of talk about verification and formal things. I'm absolutely not a formal person, but that's why I talk to people who actually know something about this. And luckily in our institute we have people who do that, so we paired with them and we managed to do some modeling of such protocols. Now for those of you that are maybe interested in that kind of work, I can just tell you on a very high level. Traditionally, authentication and key establishment protocols are analyzed in a Dole-Viao model, where you have no notions of location, channel characteristics, or time. Okay? So, and all of those you somehow need to analyze distance bounding protocols, or these types of protocols. So one of the models that we came up with can capture these kind of physical layer properties, and then we formalized it and proved some protocols secure. Okay, now we, for example, have this primitive. So we built some of them. There is even a startup in Zurich doing keys for cars based on these ideas. But now we are going from, now that we have a system that can measure securely ranges, maybe we can do something more. Now the natural thing is to do secure localization. So what does distance bounding give us? Well, it gives us the following. The prover can always pretend to be further away than the verifier, but not closer. Okay? You can tell me that you are further away. You can always delay your response. I can't do much about it, right? So you can claim to be on Mars if my communication technology allows it. And also, we can assume under a strong attacker model that the attacker can always convince the verifier and the prover, if he's an external attacker, that they are further away, but he can never convince them that they are closer. So the attacker, for example, could try to block the signal coming from the prover and transmit it at some later time. So, in a nutshell, distance enlargement is easy for the attacker. Distance reduction is prevented using distance bounding protocols. So the next question is, okay, if we have that, then maybe this is not really a useful system. Why? Well, because now if I have 3 verifiers trying to figure out the location of this guy, well, he can always claim to be here. He will enlarge his three distances, so essentially I'm kind of gone. Well, not really. So, but I can be somewhat clever. I can say, I don't really care about verifying a location here because I don't have the ability to verify that location. What I can do with 3 verifiers within this so-called verification triangle, so the space defined by their locations, I can still verify a location of P. How do I do that? Well, it's a very simple idea. If you try to pretend to be here, you can delay this signal and enlarge this distance, but then you would need to shorten one of the remaining 2, and you cannot do that. So you're kind of locked down in this space. And this works equally well in 3D. So it's kind of nice and gives you some nice properties, so you can do stuff. There is still one small catch, and that is that this is good for secure localization, so it can prevent spoofing. So if the verifiers and the prover are collaborating, you have a really strong secure localization system. There's no way that someone can externally spoof a location of P such that he is somewhere else. It's just laws of physics, right? He cannot speed up the signals. But if a prover is untrusted, and if he has 3 friends that can clone the key that is in the prover and place them at 3 corners, then your location verification scheme is gone. So you can do spoofing detection, but you cannot do location verification if your prover is able to extract the key and then clone the devices. Okay, so lesson learned. We can do some secure localization, prevent spoofing. We can do location verification, but location verification remains vulnerable to attackers with several carefully placed devices. But we can use distance bounding for many, many nice things. So now that I can upper bound my distance to you, now I can do something more clever. Now I can go back to my security stuff and say, oh, I have this fancy thing called distance bounding, and can I now use it for something smart? And in fact, we showed that we can. So what can we do? Well, I can now do access control, right? I can say, look, I have a pacemaker. If I allow you to get 3 centimeters away with your reader from my pacemaker, I will allow you to reprogram it. If you are more than 3 centimeters away, maybe up to, I don't know, 10 meters, I will allow you to maybe just read the information. If you're more than 10 meters away, I don't allow any kind of access. So you can really define access based on distance. And this is a very kind of useful and very natural thing, right? You would like to have an access point at home where you wouldn't need to give the key to your friends. When someone shows up in your apartment, by letting him in, you gave him access to your access point. And the access point just upper bounds the distance to the device and decides whether you are in the apartment or not. So these are the kind of things that you could then do with such a system. You can of course then build on top of it and do authenticated Diffie-Hellman key pair device pairing, which has been long a very open problem. And I can then take 2 devices, and just by getting them close, they will be able to establish a secret key as long as the attacker is not within their mutual distance. So if the attacker is not in these 2 spheres, where A and B are these 2 devices, he's not going to be able to get the key. I will have a secure pairing protocol. Again, very natural. You take 2 devices, you bring them close together, and unless your attacker has a nano device with a nano antenna, flying somewhere around these devices, you are pretty much safe. At the same time, this attacker should be able to do public key crypto, yeah?
Of course, you're trading 2 things off, right? You're trading the trustworthiness of the distance information against the trustworthiness of your protocols. So your protocols are most likely getting, and the software that implements it, much more complex and therefore easier to get wrong.
Oh, I mean, look, I think you just hit the point. Thank you for this. So here's how this protocol looks like. So yes, so thank you for that point. This wasn't staged. So these protocols can get fairly hairy in the end, right? Because you have to kind of entangle what we have in security. This G to the power of XA is essentially your Diffie-Hellman contribution, so your key, and then we have to build some commitment schemes for various reasons that I don't want to get into, and then you have to measure the distance, and all of this gets very, very, very heavy, right? But, in the end, that's why we have many smart people to try to do that for us. So some of the protocols we managed to verify, but not all. So, yeah.
So, just give me an example. How big is the implementation of such a protocol? You
mean in terms of the lines of code?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, because we sort of reuse standard libraries for Diffie-Hellman and so on. So if I don't know what it is with all the libraries, but this is actually not too long. the protocol itself. But now if you import all the things from the libraries, I don't know how big it would be.
Diffie-Hellman, that's standard stuff. Presumably someone can verify.
So if that's done, we don't have much of a problem. I would say that we are not so much concerned with the implementation. What we are concerned by, and that's what I told you earlier, is that we don't have the tools yet, at least not well-accepted tools in the community or research enough tools in the community to verify the protocols that try to do guarantees in terms of time and distance. So currently we have protocols. So all the tools for the analysis of security protocols are concerned with, oh, can the attacker get the key? So secrecy. Or can I authenticate as you? Right? But you don't have the tools that can tell you, oh, he didn't cheat on the distance. Right? That's not something that we have, and that's why there is some work now in the last years on this particular problem, but it's not there is no settled formalism. Okay.
Quick question. This protocol you're showing, as far as I understand, you're combining
Diffie-Hellman and distance bounding. Yeah.
So you take two protocols and you combine them. How difficult is that in general?
This is not something that we did through any kind of composability framework. So this is done. This was done independently. So we designed it as one protocol because we needed it. Yeah. We didn't do composition. We actually have a proof of this, which proves the whole protocol, but we didn't do composition proofs. And then that would be too hairy. Okay. So the nice thing is that this kind of brings you to a lesson that we learned, which is that somehow absence awareness can bring you authentication. Why do I call it absence awareness? Well, you are aware that the attacker is not in this space defined by the distance of two devices, so you can essentially authenticate the two devices or messages coming from these devices through absence awareness. You can say, oh, something came from 5 centimeters away. Oh, it's from a trusted device, because no one else was closer. If the attacker was closer, he could fake it, but he wasn't, so you are fine, right? We also have some other results where we show that presence awareness can enable authentication, where I know that I'm in a certain space, and from that I can derive authentication, but that's a whole different story. But if you're interested, I'm always willing to talk about my work for long into the night. Okay, but then you're wondering, okay, you are now telling me about some ultra-wideband ranging systems and so forth. Some things that maybe are not so pervasive yet, but they're actually strongly coming up. And you're wondering, okay, we have our GPS, right? Everyone carries a phone with a GPS receiver. So what's up with that? So, first of all, we cannot rely on anything close to distance bounding with GPS, right? Oh, by the way, did you know GPS is completely insecure? So that's why I'm talking about securing it. So how does it work? Well, satellites will broadcast navigation signals. I'll show you this in a minute. So there is no feedback back from the receivers to the satellites. So the receivers are not going to send anything back. So in all these spy movies where someone's running around with a small GPS receiver that's at the same time sending stuff to the satellites, well, I don't know. Good luck. Unless you are dragging behind you a fairly big accumulator with a lot of power to send something back to the satellites, I don't know. So GPS receivers are just getting the signals from the satellites. And that's why we cannot use anything like distance bounding to kind of verify a distance of a device or even secure the system against spoofing. Not at least in theory. We can somehow raise the bar, but we don't have any kind of a proof. So this is France, and our main organizer is Greek, so I thought that this story would be quite appropriate. So this is a story which already happened in 2001. It was reported in 2001, but it happened a while back, I guess. So what happened here was essentially that Greeks were buying some tanks, and they had a number of Allied forces, French, British, American, making a bid for these tanks. And they wanted to see those tanks in action. So they picked a field, said, okay, why don't you show to us how these tanks can drive? But the French were kind of smart. They spoofed the signals of the tanks of the others so that those tanks would go off erratically around. and theirs would win the bid. And this was in the end discovered, and hit the news. Maybe a more recent example of GPS spoofing is that an unsubstantiated claim that Iranians managed to bring a US drone down by spoofing a GPS location of the GPS system of the drone, making it think that it's essentially landing towards a US base, and in fact they landed it in some Iranian base. But then some researchers from, I think this was Texas, they used spoofing to hack into a flying drone, so they demonstrated that this is in fact easy. I mean, it's not really hacking into, you're transmitting signals and spoofing the GPS signals, and the drone believed again that it's in some other space and not in the right location. So yes, spoofing is real. And now you might wonder, how difficult is this? Is this something that only, spies can do? No. Let me show you. Maybe before. So we actually have this in our lab. These are GPS spoofers, legally bought. If you come with your phone to our lab, we can essentially tell your phone any location that we want, right? It will happily display that location. And no, these are not obtained on black markets, but these are legitimately sold for companies that want to test GPS receivers, right? I mean, if you have a GPS receiver, you cannot really call a satellite or call NASA or ESA and say, oh, why don't you, carefully carve these signals out so that I can test my receiver, right? You need some equipment to do this. So companies happily provide you these, and thus you can do spoofing. But now the question is, why can you do spoofing? Well, first of all, there are two types of GPS signals that are sent around. There is a military and the civilian ones, right? Now the civilian ones are spread using publicly known spreading codes. So if you know spreading, fine. If you don't know spreading, it's essentially pushing the signal across a wide range of frequencies, but indirectly below the noise level, such that you can kind of in a robust manner pick it up even under strong noise. Now, if you don't have the code to dig your signal out of the noise, then you cannot easily do that, right? So if I send you something that's kind of below the noise and in pieces all around, you cannot dig it out unless you apply the correct code. Now, this code, this military code is secret, it's not given to people, but the civilian code is public because any GPS receiver needs to be able to use it. Now, you could say, well, if this is so nice, if the military code is secret, why don't they use it widely in their drones, and then they would be fine? I mean, first of all, in theory, you can spoof even military receivers. And second, there is actually a fairly large logistical problem with using military codes. Namely, this is essentially, do I have time? This is essentially symmetric key crypto, right? You are encrypting with this code, and now you should give this code to everyone who is supposed to use a military code. But that doesn't scale. I mean, if I'm giving a secret key to many people, then I don't think that's a secret key anymore, right? So they don't really have a way of giving this key to only people who they should give it to. So in many operations, and this a large percentage of agencies in a large percentage of operations are actually largely relying on civilian GPS and not military GPS because of these key management issues. So, okay. So how does GPS work? I think I have like 5 minutes before the break. So the receiver will compute its location and synchronize to the satellite clocks. So this means that you will receive your location and your time from GPS. Now, given that you are getting 4 values, you better have 4 equations, and you better have 4 satellites to compute your location. So all of the satellites are synchronized, and they will transmit their messages at the same time. You can see it in that way. And the receiver is going to measure the time of arrival of all of these signals. Now, each satellite is going to use a different spreading code, so that's how you will identify them. And based on the differences in time of arrival of these 4 signals, you will determine your location and your time. Okay? So, the signal that you are going to receive, just a very simple formula, maybe even not needed here, but so this is the system satellite time, this is the local receiver time, and you will sum up all the received times, and also there will be some noise here, and there will be an error between what you compute as your range to the satellite and what is the actual range. Now, why does this happen? Well, this happens because your local clock is not synchronized to the satellite's clock. So you are off by a certain amount, but you are off by a certain amount from all 4 satellites. Okay? So this means that when you write down the equations, this is what you get, right? Time sent minus time received times the speed of light equals the range 1, right, in this case, your location minus the location of the satellite, which you know, plus some offset between your clock and the clock of the satellite. This offset is always the same. Your location is always the same. You have essentially 4 equations with 4 unknowns, and you can solve it. Now, there are many algorithms they're quite sophisticated in the receivers to do phase lock loops and so on. So all kinds of processing happens there that I don't have time to go into. But the main idea then is that if any of these signals from the satellites get somehow delayed, you can do spoofing. Or if you replace all 4 signals with whatever the heck you generate, you can do spoofing. Why? Well, because this here fellow, this receiver, is like a man who closed his eyes and is asking the crowd, where am I? Well, whoever shouts the most, that's who I'm going to believe, right? I have no other reference, right? You're sending me 4 signals, and I'm measuring the differences in arrival between these 4 signals, and that's how I determine my location. I have no way to verify that I'm not spoofed. And that's how you can push a ship from one country to another country. If you spoof its GPS. I'll tell you why I'm kind of insisting on this ship example. It's very convenient for the schema that I'm going to present. So keep an eye on that. I think this is a good time to do a break, and then we'll, I guess it's 5 minutes, right? And then we continue. Yeah. Okay.